Our show's what you know. We'll always watch TV. And if you think we can't, we'll watch more and you'll see. That's why the people of the web believe in Jim from Las Vegas and Jakob from Sweden.
Shows What You Know, your television podcast. It's a new year. It's a new us. It's the same TV. And here we are to talk about television shows. I'm Jim from Las Vegas.
And I'm Jakob from Sweden. Oh, I had to think for a moment because it's been so long. Yes, we're back. Ho, ho, ho. The holidays are over. No more of that shit. We did a little bit of a time skip there. There's been a bunch of TV. It's come in, it's come out. But now we're back to it, back to the grind. The Golden Globes literally just happened, but everybody knows that the real mark of importance is whether your show gets discussed on Shows What You Know or not.
Very true. Very true. Although, congrats, Colin Farrell. We did discuss your show. You did win a Golden Globe for actor in a miniseries. I think they were in miniseries. This is the thing. We were talking about this recently, too, maybe about Shogun. Because we're seeing rumors or murmurs now where they're like, maybe we'll do another season of The Penguin, which I wouldn't be that against, but also, yeah, just leave it alone.
Yeah, well, on a similar note, on Shogun also won a lot of awards. Best what? But I should have had that pulled up. But best supporting male actor, let me Shogun here. Best male actor in a television drama, best television series, best female actor in a television series. Best male actor again. Sorry, yeah, that's it. But still, pretty good. Well done, Shogun. And not in a miniseries category now, because the writer's room is just wrapping up now, apparently, for season 2 of Shogun. So we have that to look forward to, whatever the fuck that's going to be.
So, I mean, we're already in our news segment. That's how, pro we are. We take a break. We go right from the intro to the news. So, I did want to mention real quick at the jump. I did mention it to Jakob before we turned on these mics, but to set a time and place for a recording, as of this recording later this evening, Monday Night Raw will premiere on Netflix for the first time. This has been a big deal over years of the making, essentially, where if you're not familiar with wrestling, WWE, their Monday night show, it's the flagship show. It's like the main draw. And it's been on USA Network for the longest time. It was also on TNN here in the States. I know it's on other networks internationally, but it was always a cable show. So it's kind of a big deal. We're making the jump to streaming. And this is another sign of Netflix has been really trying to get into the live event game. Between this, they had that, Tyson Jake Paul fight. They had football games. I believe it was football on Christmas, not too long ago. So Netflix really trying to take over everything and probably just muck it up with their mediocrity. But so now, Jakob, keep in mind, you can watch Monday Night Raw either live or, whatever your time zone is. When you wake up later, you could just queue it up on Netflix and take a peek at some wrestling if you want.
I will keep that in mind. Now, you're right. When you say for those who aren't into your wrestling or what have you, that's obviously me. But I have to assume this is one of those staples, right? When you say Monday Night Raw, those are words that I have heard in a combination. I've heard that combination of words before many times here and there. I have to assume it's one of those things that was it was on when you had the old boxy TV back in the day, and then it transitioned to the big flat TV, but now it's on Netflix. That's why it's a big change, right? It's a staple of television.
Correct. Yeah, Monday night, the famous thing, at least between WWE and at the time in the 90s, WCW was called the Monday Night Wars. That was when two rival companies were going head to head every week on Monday nights. That's why they would always be pulling out all the stops, their big storylines, big marquee wrestlers, everything they'd put into that. They'd have other shows. They'd have a Thursday show, or it later became a Friday show, but the actual big show each week was Monday. That was leading up to the monthly pay-per-views. I don't know enough. I don't really pay attention to wrestling as much. So I don't know if the pay-per-views, even though they're not pay-per-view anymore, I don't know if those are coming to Netflix as well. They might be, but it's a pretty big deal for wrestling fans. So if this is their first. I mean, the Monday Night Raw has been going since the early '90s. Like that's how it's a staple for wrestling. So I'm sure they're gonna wheel out all the old stars. Hulk Hogan's probably gonna be there, even though he's not regularly there. They're gonna want to bring in any bit of curiosity. They're gonna want you to click on that. And I'm sure maybe even work in some algorithm hints from Netflix, like, hey, make sure you do this at the top of the hour. Every few minutes, have this happen. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun to see how that plays out. And especially I didn't watch the fight. We were doing my podcast, Jim and them, but I've heard Netflix is very hit or miss with some of these live shows where you're kind of stuck buffering. I watched a little football on Christmas on Netflix. That seemed fine, but that's always kind of the big challenge as well with these streamers, because if their servers get overrun, if it's that popular of a thing that's being launched.
Yeah, I don't remember where I saw it, but I saw some sort of headline along the lines of, if Netflix can't do it, who can? Referring to like problems they've run into when trying to live stream big events through their service. So I suppose it'll be interesting to see. It does seem like, look, you're not fucking, it's not Twitter Spaces over here. You should be able to handle the amount of people that are trying to tune in. So hopefully they've got that sorted. But on the mediocrity front that you referenced, I'm sure that'll seep in. I again don't remember exactly where I read it. It could have been in this book, Filter World, which is all about sort of looking at how all of these fucking algorithms are fucking up all of our culture. But I read about like a note that Netflix writers often get that's along the lines of, no, can you have these characters say what they're doing? Because,
Yeah.
we have to make sure that people who are just on their phones can also follow along with what's happening. And that's what's happening to our culture, people. That's why we're talking about that. That's why you need us. That's why you need some curators over here digging through the garbage, telling you what's worth tuning into. And that's exactly what Shows What You Know is all about.
Absolutely. So, I mean, as I said, I'm not big into wrestling these days, but they do got me a little bit. I'm definitely going to take a peek, and I did want to just bring it up just because it does feel like it's a pretty big event for I mean, what is TV these days? I mean, Netflix I'd still consider it TV for the most part, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
TV show. But anyways, moving on from that. Oh, that's not it.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
Jacob, what have you been watching, my friend? It's been so long. I'll let you. Spoiler alert: I haven't been watching a ton of TV. But Jacob, what have you been watching?
Oh, I've been watching a ton of TV. I'm going to make myself laugh because I was just like, you need us to watch the latest and greatest of what's been going on. And now I'm just going to tell you about a bunch of old TV shows I've been watching. I don't know what it was about Q4 2024 that got me in a sort of comfort TV kind of vibe. But yeah, I've been tuning into some classics. I will say very briefly, I did finish Dune Prophecy. I believe you watched that one episode and then that's it, right, Jim?
Yeah, I fell behind just the busyness of the holidays, and I'm sure I'll eventually catch up. But then I wasn't hearing like an outwardly buzz of like, you got to see this, so it just kind of haven't. I remember because I liked the first episode, so I'll go back and watch it.
Yeah, that defensive. Oh no, I will watch it. I've said that before as well. Um, Dune, it was pretty good. I only wanted to reference it very quickly because I don't have that much to say about it. I thought it was pretty good. I think that's why I haven't seen a bunch of rave reviews, and I wouldn't give it a rave review either. But hey, if you like the first episode, there's more of it in the show. The rest of it has more episodes, and they're quite similar. They're all very good looking. For some reason I expected it to be a mini series because everything's a mini series, and then turns into a multiple, like they always pitch everything as a miniseries and then it suddenly becomes a multi season show. But no, it is just continuing, and it's very clear from the ending that they're continuing on the story. So it has a relatively satisfying finish, but I thought it was solid overall. I wasn't super thrilled every time about putting it on, but I always enjoyed having watched it after the fact and watching it while I was doing it, So a mild recommend, but that's not even what you've been watching. That's just a quick one. Just want to throw that in there as a one solid actual new show, because now I'm going to talk about Buffy.
Yes.
Now
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
we both love Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
We could easily do a podcast just talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I went back to the very start. I went back to season 1 of Buffy. And
It's always kind of rough goings doing that a little bit, though.
Jim, welcome to my TED Talk. Season 1 of Buffy is just as good as later seasons. That's what I've realized this time around.
Okay.
I was like you. And I've always been like that, because if you're recommending Buffy to someone who's never seen it before, I mean, the first season, it's pretty cheesy. Or what would you lay out as the reasons for it being a bit rough to go back into, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, it's although I guess thinking about it now, if this like the way you've just kind of contextualized it, because at the time, like more so either while the show was going or shortly within a year or two of it being done, recommending it to people, I think of the later seasons of having like better effects, better budget, better storytelling. But now I can see that probably all the effects are cheesy. Like at the
Yeah.
time, you'd be like, "Oh, this is great for TV." But we've also, you've kind of recontextualized my thought on it, because we're also in a world of so many genre TV shows
Mhm.
where there's more of a reference point than there ever was at the time. Like, I know it just seems obvious. I mean, obviously, you had like the X-Files or like the different Star Trek shows, but at the time, to try to be like, no, it's like in a high school, but like supernatural stuff happens. Like that's such old hat at this point. There's so many shows like that, between just shows that have gone on for the past few decades and just the stuff that's on streaming, that I guess I think that's more the stuff that I would try to explain people away of in season 1, is them adjusting to the idea of like, oh, it's a high school drama show, but also a teacher might be a praying mantis or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very prolific in that sense, in that like you wouldn't be as your head wouldn't be as like confused by what's going on, because it's sort of set the stage in so many ways for things that came after. But Jim, let me be clear here. Like, you are right. Like, it's the later seasons are definitely better. But also what I said is true. And basically it's obviously not as good as later seasons in many ways. So like, as far as just the action sequences, they don't have as high of a budget. They do mediocre acrobatics, and you have sound effects that like swoosh swoosh whoosh. Like, it's
Yeah.
silly. There's the Master is the main villain of season 1, and he is in his leather outfit is just so ridiculous and such an impotent antagonist. He never does anything throughout the whole season, and he has a sidekick who's the Anointed One, who is a child who is also completely passive and does nothing the entire season. So it's not only the effects, it's also like story-wise, right? It's not as engaging. There's not that much going on. The child actor is supposed to be creepy, but he's just like an awkward looking smiling child doing an impression of an emotionless vampire, walking all stiffly and weird. But basically what I'm saying is, the way that it's not as good as later seasons, that is a particular kind of cheese that has only matured over time. All of those things, I appreciate that part of it to a greater extent. I watched all of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. I did a whole PowerPoint trying to convince you to watch it, because it kind
You
of
did.
takes all of those things and makes fun of it, or like heightens it, and I get to see all of that in Buffy. Plus, more importantly, it's also laying the groundwork. Yeah, season 2 is better, season 3 is better, but it could never reach those heights if it didn't have a solid foundation to stand on. Praying Mantis episode, as you referenced, it's a silly thing where teachers are praying mantis, but it has a solid thematic foundation. The writing, even though I make fun of it, it's still solid throughout, in that every single episode is like a teen thing that is heightened into the realm of fantasy. It's always, there's a girl that's being ignored, and through the supernatural twist, that means she actually becomes invisible. And every single episode is that, and that is the whole conceit of Buffy. And like, you can say that in a pitch meeting or whatever, but it's such a genius concept. It is so well executed, and all of the cheese. You know what? I love cheese. It's one of my favorite types of food. So
Yeah.
what's not to love in Buffy season 1?
So are you just in season 1? Is this just a small little rest stop that you're just like partaking in a few episodes, or do you think you're going to keep rewatching?
I think I'm going to keep rewatching, but I did take a break because I was like, I do need to go and write my TED talk about how Buffy season 1 is just as good as later seasons. And if I move on to season 2, I might not actually, I'll just be distracted by talking about something happening in season 2. So I'm like, I actually need to go and write that. So I haven't moved on yet, but yeah, and that's another thing. It's only 12 episodes. Doesn't overstay its welcome. I feel like if it was maybe the same length as later seasons that are all 20 plus episodes, the cheesiness might get a bit much, but it's a breezy watch. Yes, it kind of makes sense that we still have to tell people you got to get through season 1. But guess what? It's 12 episodes. They're not even an hour long. They're like 40 minutes. You get through them, no bother at all.
I recently was listening to, while I was driving around, I was listening to the Buffy musical soundtrack. So, and then I think Sarah Michelle Gellar recently did say, for the longest time, she was always like, yeah, I don't like if they reboot Buffy, because there was always this talk. They even had announced a writer a few years ago of how they were going to do some sort of Buffy revival. It was always questionable on what that meant. Some
Yeah.
people meant that as it was going to be a full-on reboot with no connection. Other people thought it was going to be connected, but Sarah Michelle Gellar had always said hey, I'd close that chapter. I don't need to do that. But I think now she's doing press for the Dexter prequel, and she's like, what do I care about coming back and doing things that should be gone and done with? So I'm of the, I guess we tend to get precious, or people online get precious about things. I'm definitely of the mind that Buffy's a very particular time and place, and we don't really need to revisit that. But unless we're just rewatching the old episodes. Now, are you
Yes.
watching them in widescreen with the badly, like you could see the crew and stuff now? I mean, I don't know if they give you much of a choice depending on where you're watching it.
Jim, I put in the work to get the 4:3 version, okay? Because I did start the sort of HD remaster, and there is a certain fascination in being able to see people's actual pores and things like that. You kind of, it's weird, and I felt this way when I watched like Back to the Future, an HD remaster thing as well, where or 4K or whatever, and I'm like, I should not be able to see this level of detail. It looks too real. It doesn't look like I'm looking at a film. It looks like I'm looking through a portal into the reality that's there, and that seemed wrong. But I think the reason that seems wrong is the crops are bad. Like as in, well, actually, so
Explain it real quick.
Yes,
People that
sorry,
don't
I
know.
realized. I
Yeah.
know it's way too inside. So seasons 1 to 3 of Buffy are all seasons of Buffy are 4:3. And should be viewed in a 4:3 video format. Now, the first 3 seasons, there was basically a transitional period, people, where widescreen was not yet adopted as a standard. So people were composing their shots in 4:3 and fully intending their shows to be in 4:3, but they were shooting them with cameras that actually got a wider range than that. And some of those TV shows, we've gone back now, and because everyone has a widescreen television, they put out the widescreen version of them.
And real quick, to just even break it down a little bit for like younger people out there, 4:3 is like TVs used to just be square, like they were essentially square rather than widescreen. You may have seen things even like The Simpsons, like animated shows, suffer from this because then they tried to put it in widescreen, but they just chop things off the top and bottom, which like ruin jokes because they just try to format it for the current widescreen. But continue.
Yes, there's basically 2 ways, because I hate this. I think things should be watched in the format originally intended. I'll get into why. It's, as you said, you can lose jokes. You can also see like parts of the sets and things. And I think that's kind of fine, but it's also, I think you don't realize what you're missing until you switch between the two, which is what I was doing with Buffy. And then I'm like, oh, I actually like emotionally, this is completely different, because they've for seasons 1 to 3 of Buffy, there is no widescreen. So you're not expanding it, you're cutting in. So you're cutting out parts. So basically the compositions are all wrong. You're often like cutting people's heads off. So if you know anything about shooting and composition and all this shit, like those will be concepts you're familiar with, but it affects you either way. Even if you don't know about that stuff, you still get a completely different impression. And that's only half of it, because the color correction on the Buffy remaster is some of the worst I've ever fucking seen. And I was switching between the two, it's appalling, Jim, because they'll have something that's supposed to be at night and it fully just looks like day. And the cheesiness, all of these things we're talking about, the thing is, it worked originally as a TV show. It still worked because it was shot in this 4:3 format. It was dark, moody. You don't show the monsters. You only show a fucking arm or something, and it's scary. And that's how you make it work, is through lighting and composition. And they fucked with both of those aspects when they remastered it. So the lighting is not as dark if you watch the HD remaster. It's actually like bright and boring because they haven't applied any of the same color correction. And they've cropped things so that basically nothing is scary, and you can't even pretend that it's scary if you're watching the HD version. I actually was watching the HD remaster, and then I put in the work to find the as high a resolution as I can sort of DVD, which is really the only way to do it, which is not available on any streaming service, because every streaming service will just crop things and fuck with the original. And this is part of why physical media is making a big comeback now in the 2020s.
Yeah, media preservation, people. It's important. But anyways.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
Jacob, what other old TV show you've been watching?
Yeah, so to continue on about aspect ratios, I've been watching Gilmore Girls.
Yes.
Another show that we both love. We had a podcast called Maisel Men, where we talked about Amy Sherman Palladino's other TV show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. But of course, Gilmore Girls is and remains her biggest TV show, I would say, in terms of it's a classic. Everybody knows Gilmore Girls.
We also had a podcast called Cut to Black about Sopranos, and we brought up Gilmore Girls all the time.
Yes, we probably talked about Gilmore Girls more on that than on our Maisel Men podcast. But yeah, no, I am actually going to continue on the same theme here, because Gilmore Girls, also a show that was completely intended to be in the 4:3, the sort of boxy old TV format. But this show was shot in a way where they had what was to the left and right of that composition. So there is sort of a widescreen version, and that is the version that you'll see if you go on to most streaming services. And that's the version I was watching happily for the first part here, because I've rewatched the first season and a half, more or less. And I was watching the widescreen version. I didn't find it to be too much of a problem. And then I tried cropping in. I manually cropped it in to 4:3 because they're adding stuff to left and right. You can actually do that and still retain like a high quality and everything. And I was like, damn, this is so much richer. The composition is well thought out. The problem was in the widescreen, and I didn't even think about this or realize it. I kind of noticed, obviously, there's a lot of space on the left and right, but basically, it's all empty. The world is empty and boring in the widescreen version. That's the problem, especially a show like this that has a lot of dialogue, a lot of sort of continuous ones where people are walking around or shot reverse shots. They're all... The original version is composed to create an immersive, populated, and warm world. And the widescreen version, it's not as bad as the Buffy remaster, right? And I think the color correction is all kind of fine. It's not nearly as bad. It's not as atrocious because it's also a more high key show. It's not relying on moody lighting and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I actually manually cropped in to get the original, or as close to the original crop 4:3 as I could for Gilmore Girls as well.
It's so cool and nerdy that you're like, wait a minute, I want to see, because it's interesting. I like hearing it because, yeah, they had the foresight to know that HD was going to be the format and that's where things were going, but they also knew, hey, majority of people watching this, even if you have a widescreen TV, your provider isn't sending an HD, like a widescreen signal or whatever. It's still, everything's coming in with the standard square. And then yeah, in the early 2000s, obviously that all started, early to mid 2000s, that all started to change. Um, but yeah, is it just because of the holiday cozy season that you decided to go to the cozy core of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Gilmore Girls, like the heyday of the CW or even the WB network, if we go way back in the day?
I think the U.S. election kind of kicked it off. I think
Yeah.
I started watching both of them as the results kind of came in there. I was like, I have been watching too much of the news and just
Yeah.
kind of. It's time to go into a cocoon. And literally for the first at least 12 episodes, I was going like back and forth episode to episode. So I watched episode 1 of Buffy and then episode 1 of Gilmore Girls, and I was kind of keeping pace more or less throughout. So I was kind of making my own little TV channel, cropping in 4:3, really going old school with a blanket, and it was Christmas. And when I got to the Christmas episode of Gilmore Girls, and it's Christmas, I mean, come on, you got the Christmas tree in the corner. Why? How could
Well,
you possibly go wrong?
the weird thing is because I don't, I because my fiance was talking about like Christmas episodes of Gilmore Girls, and I was like, I don't know if they really have them, but I guess they kind of do, just
Yeah.
because I'm thinking like Amy Sherman Palladino's Jewish, so like, yeah, I'm thinking more of Mrs. Maisel, like, obviously, that show's very Jewish, and I
Mm,
guess they did have Christmas trees, and obviously, they would make it Christmassy with the lights and the snow and everything because it's in a, sleepy, small Connecticut town, of Stars Hollow, um, but, yeah, I mean, I do have something to add to this because as Jacob knows, you were watching Gilmore Girls, I went and visited Stars Hollow over the holiday season.
yes.
For people that don't know, actually, I'm wearing my Life in Death Brigade shirt right now. That's from later seasons of Gilmore Girls. For people that don't know, Warner Brothers Studios, the WB Network, Warner Brothers, they make movies, they make television shows. Stars Hollow is on their backlot. It is basically their like main square USA, like any street USA or whatever. It's been used in other um shows, movies, whatever. I've never really watched Pretty Little Liars, but from my understanding, a lot of the sets are used in Pretty Little Liars. But they do a studio tour, and the studio tour is always, if you're ever in California, it's worth, if you have a passing interest in movies and television, it's worth going to regardless. Um, it's very, I mean, right now it's very young Sheldon oriented, which
Yeah.
because obviously it's a popular show. I don't know a lot about it, or they talk a lot about like Big Bang Theory or Friends and stuff. But during the holidays, they do a thing called, this year, I don't know if it's always called this, but it's called Holidays Made Here, which is a take on, a few years back they did a Horror Made Here, which was similar, where it was like more of like haunted houses and stuff. But with Holidays Made Here, they do up the whole square like Stars Hollow. So you've got Luke's Diner, you've got the gazebo in the main center area, you've got Stars Hollow High School's dolled up. Kim's Antiques was there. You got Lorelai's house. You've got Suki's house. Um, they got Dosey's Market. They got
Damn.
like the Stars Hollow bookstore. It was so cool. Now it's even like I mean, because I thought it was just kind of part of the tour or something like that. Like I did the deluxe tour just in case because I wanted to make sure I got like whatever there was to be had. But
Yeah.
it's kind of separate from the tour. The tour is still great. Like the deluxe tour is still great. They bring you into their prop house. They bring you on like the city backlots and explain a lot of stuff that was shot there. Even like segments of Jurassic Park. They did pickups in areas, stuff like that. Like cool little stories. But then they basically, when the tour is done, they just drop you off in Stars Hollow, and you could just hang out there for hours.
Fantastic.
Um, they even had the secret bar from the Netflix. I wasn't as familiar with it. It like was vaguely in my memory because I haven't rewatched the Netflix show as much as I've watched the regular show. But it was just a fun little thing. It's just in a little alley. It's like a little tavern for the secret bar, and they have themed alcoholic drinks based off of like Miss Patty's Punch and stuff like that. I was loving it. We were there for hours. They have
Ah,
tons of merch. Everyone's wearing Team Dean or Team Logan or Team Jess buttons.
Oh my
Uh,
god.
and
So jealous.
even to the point where our friend Scott Patterson, who people that don't know, he plays the character Luke Danes on the show, one of the main will they won't they of Lorelai and Luke, who runs the diner. And he was there because, well, I mean, obviously he's from the show, but if you don't know, he hosts a rewatch podcast, which we reviewed on our other show, the podcast about television. And he's not a great. I mean, to
He's
be
not. Yeah, I was gonna ask, has your opinion changed? Were you so starstruck? Because yeah, there's so much lore to shows what you know if you're just finding us. But yes, we have a podcast where we review other people doing television podcasts, famous people.
Yes.
So actors specifically rewatching their own shows. And yeah, we have Scott Patterson. He does not bring a lot of energy to his delivery in the podcast. But what about in real life?
I mean, in real life, you could tell he was jazzed to be there. I mean, I wonder how early. I guess he had been doing the show for a while by the time we listened to it, right? It wasn't like
Yeah.
just early. We couldn't just write off his shortcomings as,
No.
"Hey, I'm new
No,
to
I listened
podcasting."
to. I dipped into a couple episodes.
Yeah.
There's no. Yeah, no.
It's funny because when you hear his podcast, like, yeah, he doesn't remember most of it, which is fine. I mean, it was a job he had 20 years ago. Um, but when he was there, because he makes his own coffee. It's a thing called like Scotty P's Coffee because obviously he played Luke, so that was like a part of the event too. So I'm sure he makes some good money here. And also, I mean, he's a goddamn rock star, obviously. Like
Yeah,
they
I saw a TikTok of people dressing up like at this place,
oh,
dressing up their
so many
boyfriends as
Lukes.
Luke. Were there a lot of Lukes? Were
Dude,
you a Luke?
I wasn't a Luke. There were so many Lukes though.
Yeah.
Um, but like you, because it was the thing where they didn't like quite say he was going to be there, but I was there the second day of the event. I'd only
Mm.
missed the first day, and on the first day, he was there. Plus, I think Miss Patty might have been there, and I think like Miss Kim, like a few other people were there the day before. Um, so, but there was like this idea of like, oh, maybe he'll still be there. And at one point, we're walking around and we see this big group just like gather around over by the Luke's diner area. And so we just go over there too. And everyone's just standing there. None of the people are coming up. They're like, what's going on here? We're like, we don't know. Just a group of people came. So we came. And you do see that they're professional cameras all of a sudden. So I think everyone saw like, oh shit, what are they? They got professional cameras. Something's going on. And then Luke does come out. He came out of the like high school area to walk across the street into Luke's diner. And Warner Brothers, I mean, to their credit, they have a great studio tour. They don't know how to handle crowds because they're
Mm.
not used to just having people mulling about. Like usually everyone's broken up in a tour guide and the tour guide brings you around and then they send you on your way. So they like it is almost like Beatles pandemonium happening, but he's pulling women out of the crowd and dancing with them in
Oh,
Stars Hollow.
all
And
right.
it's playing the song when Luke and Lorelai first dance. I think it's at Liz's wedding or something. And so like I mean, not to get too blue, but they were like panties were drenched. Like it was
Duh, we were all thinking it.
it was going down. But it was like he went into Luke's and everyone just rushes it and they stop us at the door. We don't know what's going on. They're not communicating anything. Like, is he doing a meet and greet? Isn't he doing a meet and greet? It turned out he wasn't, but then they did this weird thing. They made us all line up. Then they told us it wasn't a meet and greet. And then security came out and they're like, all right, we need 10 people. And first of all, why would you do that? And of course,
Yeah.
as soon as they say that, everyone rushes again. And they're like, get back, get back. They're almost like fighting women that are trying to get into be with Luke and Luke's diner and have a coffee with them or whatever. It was quite a great outside of that, like that didn't ruin it for me because I
Yeah.
didn't care. It would have been cool to get a picture with him. Obviously,
yeah.
don't get me wrong. Like if I was in Luke's diner and he's at the counter or whatever, that would have been cool, but it didn't ruin anything.
Yeah.
Let me see. Actually, I think I have just some footage of Stars Hall. Let me see if
Oh,
I can
nice.
throw it in here.
Yeah, because like if you I love, by the way, that we're not pitching the concept of this show at all, or Buffy. Like we're just like, you get it. Like basically this is our blanket recommendation of watch both of these shows, and now we're going to talk
Yeah.
about them for a bit for various reasons. And if you haven't seen it though, Stars Hollow is the town is, this is the the noobiest sort of film dude thing to say, but the town's such a character. But it really is, like,
Yes, it
it
really
really is
is.
about the town and the people who live in it. It's a quirky small town, and that's why I can only imagine that just being there is fantastic enough on its own. And it's not, and then just seeing someone who was on the show is obviously super cool and is going to add to it. But you weren't there because you're like, oh my God, I need to see this actor. You're there and you're already so deep in the Stars Hollow lore without needing to be one of the 10 people.
Yeah, no, exactly. Wait, hold on. I'm just trying to see if I could pull this up. All right.
Cool. So youtube.com slash youtube.com slash shows what you know, guys. It's upsetting to me to even see this, to be honest.
I tried to just get some walking around footage. So this was just kind of like they got the lights all up, all the houses are done up with Christmas lights. It was pretty cool.
You got the Osmo Pocket right here as well. I can see that you're
This is
just
actually
walking
just
around.
my phone.
What
This
the
is actually,
okay, it's
yes.
great quality, Jim. This is the type of thing you see on YouTube when it's like walking around Tokyo 4K, whatever. Except it's fucking Stars Hollow. I love it.
See, there's Kim's Antiques.
Antiques.
You could walk inside, and they had everything's all blocked off like real Kim's Antiques. Like there's supposed to be a lot of stuff in there, but they would play audio from the show. You could hear like Rory and Kim like yelling like, "Mom, are you there?" And Miss Kim being like, "Over here." So it was like they were kind of hidden in the furniture. So then you
Fantastic.
got that's like Suki's house. Now, obviously, the magic of Hollywood. If you walk through that house, it's a facade. But
Yeah.
when you come out on the other side, it's Lorelei's house. So that's kind of cool.
What? Whoa. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, just a little taste. Just a little taste. It was cool.
Something for the TikTok.
How do I get rid
Yeah.
of this now? How do I hide it? There we go.
I'm so
But
jealous.
yeah, I think it's a thing they do. They've done it the past few years. I've always been meaning to go, and this year I finally was able to go. And I would, if they do it again next year, I gotta go. It was that fun, even though it's just hanging out. It's literally just buying merch and hanging out, but
Yeah.
it's dope.
Yeah, and it's like, I would do the same for Sunnydale, for Buffy. It's just something about these shows that have a certain nostalgic quality to them as well. Like you become such a chump for them, where if they're a much bigger thing like Harry Potter or whatever, they build a whole theme park for it. But this is so much better and cooler as well because it's actually where they shot it, So
Yeah.
fantastic stuff, Jim.
Yep.
I have just lightning quick couple of impressions from rewatching it. We obviously are a bit tight on time here, but just my quick thoughts from season 1. I'm continually unimpressed by Dean. I used to be more team Dean, but now mostly what I get out of it is I get more out of the Tristan storyline, to be honest. And who gives a fuck about Tristan?
Yeah,
but
fuck
at least in that storyline, I get more Paris Rory content, which is the true will they won't they of Gilmore Girls.
Yes.
That's it. Quick thing on Dean, don't give a fuck about him. They don't have a good relationship at any point, but whatever. Good starter boyfriend, but you need to move on. Max, though, Max Medina. Oh my God, I did not expect how much I would hate Max. The worst sleaze bag going. He's such a creep. Maybe the actor is just not charismatic enough for the fast-paced dialogue and rapport of the show, but like these two, they don't even move in together or even fucking spend time together before they decide to get married. He's constantly picking fights, constantly pushing Lorelai to move faster in their relationship. And yeah, the marriage thing is fully separate. But yeah, am I speaking your language? What's your opinion on Max?
No, you're right. Especially from my recollection, he never quite gelled well with the rhythm of the show. And it's interesting because Amy Sherman Palladino's brought that actor back a few times. He's not always a big part, but he'll always pop up in her other shows. We just recently saw him in Penguin as well. He was one of the Falcons or whatever.
That's right.
And I don't dislike him as an actor, but then again, thinking about it, like almost all of Lorelai's boyfriends, like I don't know if it was by design or just because it felt like the chemistry with Luke was so much better. No one was ever like, because then there's like what Digger, and then there's of course Christopher. Like none of them were really that great. But yeah,
Mm.
Max. I mean, at least Max has the is it what daisies? Was it like the thousand daisies that he
Oh, but
gives to her?
even that was just manipulative because he's just kind of trying to get her to marry him. Which,
Yeah.
okay, slight spoiler for end of season 1 of Gilmore Girls. It's not a massive spoiler, but basically, yeah, if you haven't watched it, you're gonna watch it right now because we've recommended it. Maybe go skip forward a little bit, but I already said he's really trying to get Lorelai to marry him. These two fuckers have not lived together. Even him staying over, which is happening just 2 weeks before the wedding, he's staying
Mm,
over at their house for the first time, and she's
yeah.
like, "Whoa, can I even sleep with a boy in my room?" And the thing is, like, yeah, it's supposed to be that she's like, that's her space for Rory and her family and all that. But guys, you can do this stuff with training wheels. Like, you don't have to go immediately to being married. And part of it is a culture difference where I think in the US, everyone gets married a lot younger than in Sweden, where I've grown up. And it's like a big thing of like, you got to bing, bang, boom, get to being married. It's a very standard societal expectation. And you find someone you can get married and that's it. Versus, in Sweden, people are together 10 years and have a kid and then maybe they decide to get married is more sort of the standard that I see. Um, but I think Max and Medina was always supposed to be they're moving a bit fast, even by a US metric, and
Yeah.
that to me is cartoonish. It is so absurd what they're doing, and I realized that when I was in season 2, because without saying any spoilers, 2 other characters decide to get married without moving in together as well in season 2, and it is almost not quite, but almost equally bonkers to me. And that's when I realized, like, oh, that's supposed to be cute and normal, and then the way that Lorelai and Max are doing it is supposed to be a little bit too fast. And I'm like, both of these are insane to me. You guys have not lived together. You should do that first. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I do got to rewatch. I that used to be a show I'd always just have on in the background,
Yeah.
for the longest time. I got to get that back into the rotation because it is an amazing show.
Yeah. Well, I'm still in it. I'm in season 2. I'm pretty sure Kirk's just a normal guy and they're just bullying him. That's my final thought on Gilmore Girls, but we'll check back in.
What TV shows have you been watching? Tell me, I gotta know.
Finally, a show I've been watching, and I believe you've been watching. I'd mentioned this a while back. I was a highly anticipated show for me. The new Star Wars show, Skeleton Crew, which is basically Goonies in Star Wars, or if you're a younger person, it's Stranger Things in Star Wars, which really grinds my gears. God damn it. Um, but yeah, surprisingly enough, now I think part of it was maybe timing of when this premiered, because I think I was traveling. I think I might have even been traveling for the Gilmore Girls thing I went to. Like I ended up getting backlogged, and I didn't watch this show initially when it premiered, even though I'd been hyped for it like all year long.
Mm.
And then when I finally watched it, I was a bit let down, kind of. Like not let down really, but like there was something that wasn't there. Maybe it was just my youth. Maybe my youth was gone and I just didn't have that wistful fun inside me anymore. But
Mm.
I, I'm caught up. I think you're still 2 episodes behind, but as of this recording, there's been 6 episodes. Episode 7 is tomorrow as of this recording. I'm way more positive on the show now, but I do think they're dropping the ball in a lot of ways. Like I think they have the Star Wars aesthetics they have nailed. Like there's different planets we're going to. We're seeing a lot of aliens, which in a lot of new Star Wars, weirdly enough, we don't see a lot of aliens, probably for budgetary reasons, for whatever it is, or just laziness. Like we don't feel like throwing some prosthetics on some extras or whatever. Like
Yeah,
even
or it's the
Buffy,
same aliens.
yeah, I mean, even Buffy could do that back in the day.
Yeah.
But we're seeing a lot of aliens. We're seeing different planets. They have a like the Star Wars aesthetics are there, the ships and stuff like that. The core idea, I think, is great. Like kids going on a space adventure. Um, but and this is weird because this is the main. We don't say this about shows ever. Usually, the main criticism on most shows we watch these days are these episodes are too long. I feel like this is the rare case where these episodes are probably a tad too short because some of the character stuff ends up being missed, and some of these like they're playing with the idea of almost episode of the week type stuff, even though it's an overarching story. But some of the conflicts get like wrapped up a little too easy or a little too quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and I really think they're dropping the ball with the kids' characters because, or at least the initial decisions were not great because we start with Wim. Wim's kind of our main character. And then they quickly make Wim into a stupid dumbass that does nothing, like,
Yeah.
and then they make Fern is supposed to be this cool, like cool character's got it all together, but when every now and then she might have a breakdown where she cries, and when she cries, we got to be like, holy shit. But Fern is cool all the time. But it's almost like they make Fern too cool, where I kind of dislike her to a point. Um, and then the other characters are still like there, like they're what do we have? Is it Neil
Yeah, the elephant is Neil, and the
and
glasses,
KD, I believe.
yeah, glasses KD kid. Yeah.
Yeah, which I get. My biggest thing is I don't understand what they were trying to do with Wim or KB. I'm
Oh,
sorry, not KD. KB.
KB.
Um, I don't dislike Fern's. I don't like the idea of Fern's character. Like she's almost like a Han Solo. Like yeah, she's smart, but she's rebellious.
You're saying
But
you
then
wait, you don't dislike it, or
I
what did
don't
you say?
dislike. What I'm
Yeah,
saying is I don't dislike the initial idea.
yeah,
The execution on how the show does it, because at least to me, the way I read it is they feel like they really want us to be like, oh my God, Fern's so cool. Fern's got it all together. But in a way, it's at the expense of the other characters because honestly, I really hope we're working up to Wim having a big moment because he's mostly a dumb shit. And which is fine. You could have fun with stuff like that. But also, him and Neil are both dumb shits. Like,
yeah.
they're easily tricked with things, which could be charming. But then Wim is always doing the thing of like, hey, don't touch that thing. And then he touches the thing anyways. But he keeps doing it every time.
Yep.
And even no spoilers, but on this most recent episode, you haven't seen it yet. There's a moment where I thought they were going to pay off the Wim touches stuff and bad things happen, and maybe finally he was going to be able to do something cool. But they take the moment away from him and they give it to another character. It could be the character of Fern. It might be. We'll see.
Okay.
But I know I'm being very critical. Overall, I still really like the show. I'm still into the vibe. I like that it's fun. I do like that it's kind of for kids, so I can forgive some things just and be like, oh, it's a kids show. But I just need a little bit more clarity. Like again, they do have a mystery that does seem interesting, but then again, we've been down this road before. Like if you're gonna build so much around these mysteries, you better have a really good payoff. Um, so we'll just have to see how that goes. What are your thoughts?
Jim, you're speaking my language. I'm kind of relieved to hear you say all of
All
these
right.
things because it means I wasn't wrong to not take too many notes because I could just say, I agree with Jim. Or
All right.
although some of the notes that I did take are very similar. So I wrote main character, meaning Wim. Main character is an absolute asshole, not interested in getting home or bringing home his friends who he endangered through his idiocy. Because all of that is charming. I think the setup is good as you like the first episode. It's like solid enough. It's just from there you have to have the incompetent kid kind of learn or grow or
Yes.
even if you don't do that, have because they want him to be like the enthusiastic propellant of things happening, but literally the main way they do that is by him just getting them into worse and worse situations, and then
Yes.
Fern gets them out of those situations by being cool kid.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I don't think that the the thing is, when I hear like, oh, it's a new Star Wars show, I assume it's going to be bad. I assume it's going to be worse than it is, I guess. So I kind of have had low expectations coming in. I knew you were excited, and we saw a trailer, and it looked kind of like Goonies in space, and that's clearly what they're trying to do. But I had such low expectations that even with that, I was like, yeah, it's piratey. I didn't realize it was going to be so piratey. No complaints about that aspect.
Mm.
They start out, and if you've seen the trailer, you've seen this. They start out on this planet that's literally like a suburban planet, which seems really dumb and non-Star Warsy, and even to the point of like some of the characters and things. I'm like, this doesn't seem like a three-dimensional world, but that is kind of part of it. I
I
kind of
was
forgive
gonna
that. Yeah,
I was
because
gonna
in
push
the
back on that
yeah,
because
no, yeah,
honestly, it's the most Star Warsy thing because when you really think about it, Star Wars planets are dumb as shit. Like it's always like, here's an ice planet. I mean, they have a
yeah,
literal city planet. So, because I've seen other people have had the same criticism, so it's definitely a valid criticism. But to me, like a suburban planet is honestly the most Star Wars thing about it. I get the
yes,
actual like seeing it in play feels less Star Warsy because it feels more like a suburb here. But like they have just jungle planets and they have like winter
yeah,
planets. So to
it's
me, it's a
true.
natural progression. But I do get the criticism.
Yeah, usually you just pick a biome and go, that's the planet. But
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
whole planet.
the problem is more like the world building within that felt a bit thin. Like Wim's dad is a character. He's not a real character. He's a character of the dad that can't be around because he has to work. Like he's only
Yeah,
in basically just in the first episode as far as I've seen, and he literally says like, I have to work, and leaves like over and over, like three different scenes, which makes the whole over in suburbia is like, it's like it feels more like a parody or a thin version of what it's like to be in suburban life because it's not a three-dimensional relationship. And some of that is kind of lightened by the fact that once they get off, they realize maybe their home planet isn't exactly what they thought it was, and
for sure.
they don't actually we don't actually know what's happening on this planet. So you're like, okay, there's a bit more depth. But with that said, it's kind of a similar problem. That relationship is kind of a similar problem to what we see between the kids as well, where you're like, okay, I guess we're kind of there's a bit of repetition happening here, and then each episode being a different planet or a different adventure is cool, but it does move through it pretty fast, and I don't know if. Even though, as you said, the original Star Wars movies are maybe like pretty thin as far as like it's a cloud city, it's a city in the
Yeah.
clouds, but I still think that in the design of it, there's a lot of implied world building and stuff like that. And some of that they capture here, but at the same time, I don't know. It hasn't
I
really pulled me in.
well, that also what you're saying ties into what I was saying as well about the mystery because it's another thing that is seemingly innocuous, but it's also very tied to how they pay off this mystery. Like I'm with it so far because yeah, there's something there. There's something behind why they're planet the way it is. If their solution or their answer to that question is unsatisfying, then I'm completely on board with this being like, oh, this is stupid. But this is a thing we run into with all these shows because again, like we're talking about Buffy earlier and how Buffy was such a big influence on shows in the past. We're still feeling. I mean, I'm sure there's other shows, but to me, this is like the Lost effect or the J.J. Abrams style of storytelling. I think we're still feeling effects of that because not just this show. There's so many shows that have these intriguing premises that we end up discussing, and it's all hinging around like what is really going on, and usually it's an unsatisfying answer. Like we're looking at Westworld, we're looking at even to kind of a similar extent, like a Mr. Robot, like things
Yeah,
like that that play with these like as a storyteller, I don't want to downplay that it's not easy to come up with a premise, but it's easier to come up with a cool premise than it is to pay off that cool premise. And that's what we're seeing over and over and over again. And that even to an extent, the Acolyte, which we just watched, a few months ago, I came out fairly positive. I know you were pretty mixed to negative, and most people were mixed to negative. That's why
yeah,
it didn't come back or it's not coming back. Um, but yeah, I feel like this is more of a greater discussion than just this show. These writers or creatives, these producers, these showrunners, whatever, they're not in the lab cooking enough when it comes to to paying off all this setup. So I'll give most of these shows the benefit of the doubt until we get to that finale, and then usually what they'll do is they'll give us a half an answer, and they'll be like, "Well, just stick around for another season, and then maybe we'll pay it off."
Yeah, and
Um,
then they cancel it.
yes, but
um,
going back to Wim again, real quick, because if we're going with the Goonies analogy, we look at someone like Mikey from the Goonies, who's played by Sean Astin. He's like the main kid. He has the similar traits of Wim, of like kind of being a little annoying and pushing everyone into this adventure, but he has the other things that make it not as insufferable is that he also seemingly has more of a connection to the mystery and is able to at least explain or get everyone on board rather than bumbling like constantly through everything. And that's
yeah,
the thing is I have more of a hope because they've teased. I feel like, unless I'm misreading it, they keep teasing Wim having a big moment. So maybe if they are just delaying this payoff, I'm on board with that, because actually in the past 2 episodes that you haven't seen yet, I feel like they have these moments where they almost have Wim do something great. And
hmm.
if they can finally pay that off, that's the thing that's really, I'm really on the edge of my seat hoping that they could do, or I'm going to be really annoyed if they don't. So,
Yeah. At the same time, there's only 2 episodes left that you
yeah.
haven't seen. I'm a couple episodes behind, and these episodes are pretty short. Like,
Yes.
what are they gonna do? But I will say I don't think it has as much of a mystery problem compared to The Acolyte and compared to a lot of TV shows, because at least every episode has a self-contained plot, and at least the as far as the kids are concerned, a lot of the plot is how do we get back home, and that is a good standard plot. It's very like, we have one goal, we're going to try to do this thing, and it's very clear and straightforward, and I'm like, okay, cool. And every time they land somewhere, they're trying to get a little piece of information to move them a little bit closer, but then they find out a little bit something, how that brings them 2 steps back, and that's a decent structure to go with. But yeah, I think
Well,
it's yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Keep finish your thought first. I don't mean to interrupt.
That was pretty much it.
All
I
right.
just had like, it's decent, but it's not a new Stranger Things. It's not a new Stranger Things
Well,
season 1 anyway.
yeah, it's not to that extent, but I mean, especially in these more recent episodes, like I think they're building more around like why was the ship on their planet?
Yeah,
Their droid knows more. They're getting into like who was the captain of that ship? Who is Jod? Who is Jude Law's character? Like, what is his deal? And
right.
then why is their planet like secret, or only the tales of legend? I think those are all pretty big things that are kind of entrenched in the overall time we've spent on this show, that if
Mm,
it's not going to be a satisfying payoff, it'll be a letdown. Because now I'm starting to wonder, like, I mean, what is the time frame of how long this ship's been on that planet? Like, is the original pirate that ran that ship, like, is he long dead? Or is he potentially a character that's on their planet that they know? Like,
yeah.
is it Fern's mom, for example? Like, which would be the worst? You know what I mean? Like, is Fern's mom actually the pirate that crashed that ship? I'm not saying that I think this is what it is, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
this is something a bad show would do, and be like, well, Fern's mom crashed that ship and has been hiding the planet from the rest of the Republic for whatever nefarious reasons, because we know she has some sort of, higher up job or whatever it is, like something dumb like that. Or
Yeah.
is Wim's mom, who thought he was dead, is actually the pirate uh who
Yeah.
something stupid.
Jim, it
So
might not be exactly that, but it's going to be on that level. I can guarantee, I can almost completely guarantee, and I'm 2 episodes behind. That's
yeah.
what it's going to be. Something along those lines. It's got to be. What else?
Mm.
Like, how do they, I don't know.
Is Jude
It's going to
Law
be the overseer or whatever, and Jude Law's, I don't, I don't know about Jude Law. I don't know who Jude Law is, or I just assumed he was the guy from the intro, right? Because we start with an intro where a captain gets
Oh, he is, I'm pretty
rebelled
sure.
against. He's got to be, or he should
Yeah.
be, unless they're trying to make that a twist that he isn't, because that guy
Yeah.
has a mask and we're not 100%. But he
True.
should be that guy. But he could be, the guy. Who
But
knows?
if it, like, does he actually have force powers? Was he once a Jedi, or was he a Sith or a dark Jedi? Like, Like, or is it just all smoke and mirrors somehow? Like, I don't know, like things like that. They are cool questions, don't get me wrong. And I'm not putting the blame on this show specifically. It's just we've been down this road with shows before, and a lot of times it doesn't quite into a satisfying answer. But I'm still intrigued. I'm still on board outside of just some of the things I feel like they dropped the ball on. And to get into like a specific thing that kind of encompasses a lot of it, because it's like the third episode, maybe, or maybe it's the fourth episode when they go on a planet that's like theirs, but they're like
Yeah.
child, like warriors or whatever.
Yeah.
We have this thing where Jude Law's character does all this stuff off screen.
That was
Which-
fucked. That was so
Yeah.
weird. It was like, why is
yeah.
the runtime of this shorter? That's where I agree with
Yeah.
what you were saying of like, how is that not in there? But yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, in one respect, I get it because we're staying with our kid characters and we're building tension, and then it does serve like a narrative payoff. But on the other hand, we're disconnected from this newer character, that Jude Law's character, where we could maybe see how he maneuvers and moves and shakes within the world. You know what I mean? Where we could see how he makes these moves, and he is the character that he is. Stuff like that. But then
Yeah.
again, I can't complain about a short runtime for an episode, because I'm always complaining like
Yeah.
these episodes are too long. But it does feel like this is the one of the slight examples where it could deal with a little bit more runtime in the episode.
Yeah, and what they're building up to with the kids as well is like, you have to go to battle, and then it turns out there is no battle, so it's a bit of a like false tension situation. But I do think that's an example of the show doing a good job of like showing how these are big deals for kids. For kids, for if you were a kid, this would be a big deal, and it kind of has a good way of showing how like. At some stage where they're on like a pirate port haven thing and they just kind of immediately lose one another, I'm like, that would be what would happen, because they're children and they are stupid and they have no attention span. So I actually believe that, because that's something that would happen with grown-up characters, except I'm like, okay, no, it actually makes a lot of sense here, and it makes sense how they would react in some situations. I think that part's relatively well written. But to go back on what you're saying and the mystery and stuff like that, man, I just want the mystery to be, oh no, my teacher is a praying mantis, and then you kill the praying mantis at the end of the episode, and there's your plot. Like, I'm a simple man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think we're still both on board. I'm sure once it's done, maybe we'll do like a full on discussion of how we think it paid off. What do you think? You, the listener, you can let us know. It shows what you know. show@gmail.com. What are your thoughts on Skeleton Crew? Have you even watched it? Are you on board? Did you check out? Do you like kids? Not in that way.
Not in that way. No.
Yeah.
And if not, don't put it in an email.
Yeah, please don't.
Coming up, we have things like Severance season 2
Excellent.
after 18 years is coming back. Now, I did start episode 1 of season 1 of Severance, and then I was like, this is a lot now for me to try to fit in. I have a lot of Gilmore Girls to watch, so I haven't done a proper rewatch. But yeah, Severance season 2, I'm excited about that. Squid Game season 2 is currently out, and I have watched the first episode, but we don't have time to get into it, so maybe that's something we can dip into in future episodes as well. Besides that, let us know what you want us to cover, and if you've checked out any of the shows based on our recommendation, let us know in the comments or through an email. Once again, we're on YouTube at youtube.com/showswhatyouknow.
Absolutely. So I guess on that, strike first. No, thanks everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.